Today, in 600 Backdoors, in conversation with artist and curator Sara Rodrigues.
Speaking about front doors and back doors and what oppositions there are between what's one and what's the other, let's try to define what are the ways of operation that artists have when working with organizational contexts.
Both are interesting to work with, especially because I think front doors are normally harder to be opened for you. And so when you have it always seems like a kind of privilege that you have access to something that is selective, that not everyone can have, and suddenly you've been given this kind of offer. Backdoors are interesting because if you're not given the opportunity to show your work in a kind of direct manner within certain institutional parameters, in another way, you also are able to function within arts from a slightly different angle that allows you to actually maybe be a lot more critical, or to use tools that actually twist the state of things instead of just operating within the set of rules that you have been given. A lot of people don't consider it as a viable option. I think they consider it's considered a lesser option, and the thing that they want to do is go in through the front door, and so you might spend a whole life trying to find that front door that opens to you. And I think a lot of people feel frustration because sometimes that never happens.
Front door case.
I can't think of any specific examples, but I do think of quite a few times where people have proposed me projects that are already not closed, but they have something in mind, and because you want to participate and you want to, maybe there's some money, there's a little commission or something, or even as small as it might be, you still think it's an exciting thing that you would like to take part, and then you end up spending a lot of time doing something which kind of is a bit of a sideline to your main focus, or something, like a collaboration that wasn't signed as such, but it ends up being not quite your work.
Yeah. An in-between chimera.
Yeah, exactly.
To fit the purpose of the situation. So in those cases, what would the incentives be? You said maybe there's money.
Yeah, exactly. And you feel like it's always an incentive when someone commissions you something to kind of actually produce it, and it gets seen and it gets some publicity, and you want to take the challenge. You want to do the best as you can to what you've been proposed. Then you end up really kind of going down that route, which was not your route initially.
So it becomes an exercise in creative capacity.
Yeah.
Sometimes a bit of a Baroque theme and variations, just to prove that you can.
Two friends of mine, an artist duo called Panic Attack Duo, they do kind of political art that aims to be collective and speak about a lot of borders, identity, feminism. So they deal with a lot of these things, but they did apply to New Contemporaries and they got in. And so when the show came to London, they decided actually to do a timetable. So every day they would invite different artists to kind of inhabit this mattress that they had in the room. And so essentially they were giving a platform for a lot of different artists that weren't necessarily selected for the New Contemporaries, or neither maybe did apply, to actually showcase their work at South London Gallery.
So the selectors didn't know about what the actual activity would entail?
No, so they were supposed to be doing this kind of durational performance that just keeps reviving itself in different formations, but they didn't realize that it was going to encompass so many other artists with their own artworks, which then South London Gallery actually came to accept that this was the thing, but they never actually knew what the content would be. So they actually just trusted them.
That's a very interesting case. It was successful in opening the space for outsiders to be inside. Mm-hmm. And that shows that there is a living will from institutions to allow this to happen. Maybe at the fear of losing relevance. But at the same time, it shows that they accepted either the risk of not knowing what's in there every time, or they just didn't care. And that's the nature of these institutions. would you say that they did care about what was going to be programmed and entered in a conversation with Panic Duo about it to co-curate it, or they understood that the situation was positive in order to make them able to leverage some social capital and perspectives that are positive from the public onto them and about the things that they do, yet not caring about anything that would be programmed?
I mean, I think they kind of trusted them to make the program. And in a way or another, I think they were secured by the fact that it was inside of their piece. So in one form or another, it actually was their piece.
They managed to secure the somewhat safe space of the work.
Exactly.
With the quite recent history of the autonomy in art playing a huge role in this protection given by the bubble called work.
After Sara told me about the incredible backdoor story of the Panic Attack duo, we discussed the possibility of an in-between kind of option. We called it the window. And that's when the artist overtly redesigns the context through negotiation, rather than subverting it posteriorly. In my case, however, being approached by the committee that's in charge of organizing the celebrations of the beginning of the Portuguese discovery era 600 years ago, using this route, did not go that well.
Nothing could be celebratory and awfully critical at the same time.
Yeah.
And I was too little to maneuver it constructively. As a system designer, I didn't have the power to control what the context is for my thing. So it wasn't vague at all. It was pretty well defined, but at the same time, invisible. Because my problems with the context are not seen or known by many.
You know, it is a case when you kind of want to go a little bit against the rules or a little bit, you know, out of the context or against the context that is proposed in terms of your work being critical rather than not. I mean, you either upfrontly state that you will really go against that and you will kind of get shut down anyway. Or you can start, you know, a little bit slowly, maybe posing some questions, but still going along with the flow. And then eventually, when the work is made and becomes something that, you know, might be a little harsher than they would like to, then it's already done.
When politics is made to feel like it doesn't have a place in contemporary lives, those are the moments where you can pretty much be sure there wasn't a space for contestation, for participation, for political capacitation where it should have been. Right now in Madeira, my attempt to modify the way the system works from within failed. What do you feel you're working with when, for instance, your work that deals a lot with ecological thought and sophisticated preoccupations with humans' roles in this planet find audiences that do not have even yet started discussing or thinking anything to do with this and are separated a huge degree of worlds?
I think it's exciting.
Because
I think the further the gap is, the more the work actually is able to live and do something. And so I had feedback from some of my recent pieces where people said I really never thought of it that way. That really opened up a whole new realm. And I think that makes me really happy to hear that. I didn't even know the work could do that. But it's, yeah, so there's a fine line to where you position your critique towards. But I think it's more fruitful when the critique can not be directed at the individual, but after that it becomes part of the individual that realizes these things to actually take on board what you're saying.
Yeah, so you have a very sophisticated way of designing the interaction so that no breaking point is pushed too
I think
too
it
further.
definitely, these things I think definitely need to be very well considered, or else you end up becoming... you end up making pieces that no one wants to see and no one wants to take into account. I think it's more fruitful when you can lead people in and know that they will stay and that they will hear and that they will somehow become enticed by it. And
that requires some unspoken contract to invite them in, say, come in. But not saying exactly what it is until it is.
I feel like the idea of a Trojan horse is always an interesting one.
Yeah, me too. We can finish with this. I'll challenge you with an audience whose major problem is to long for a past that never existed.
You can only stop longing for a past that never existed if you realize that the future is only possible when you actually accept that realization.
This music you're listening to is the aria Cara Sposa from Handel's opera Rinaldo. In it, you hear Rinaldo, the protagonist, suffering the loss of his love, Almirena, who is forever gone, and yet he cries for her return drenched in such lament of pitiful agony and ingenuous hope. I chose this piece to finish the podcast as a double dedication. First, to the humans who literally burnt down most of Madeira's forests in order to feed the slave-powered sugar industry, and soon were left, obviously, crying for the trees to return. And second, to the contemporary ethno-nationalists who long for a past that never existed. This was 600 Backdoors. Thank you for listening. See you next time.